If you remember, Walter, around the month of Feb or March, I was contributing to open source and particularly to Sugar Labs. And around this time, the project ideas for Google Server of Code came out, and I was interested in this one project called GitHub Backend for Music Blocks, which I'm also working on for the summer. And I prepared a small doc for the project. You went through that doc after our bi-weekly meeting. You commented on that doc for like 10-15 minutes. And I was like stunned after that. So I was thinking that the person who is commenting on my work is an undergrad from Harvard. He did his master's in MIT. He went on to become the director of MIT Media Labs, which is like probably one of the biggest research labs. And then Sugar Labs also was the president of this great project called OLPC. And then he works full time at Saucero, and then he reviews my work. So I was like very surprised. So welcome and thanks for joining again.
Sure. Well, I learned very early on in my career that, nobody has a monopoly on good ideas, and that, you want to try to listen to as many people as you can to get input. And certainly when I was at MIT, the quality of the undergrad students there was, you know, superlative, and so it was a great place to listen. So listening to the students was always both a pleasure and interesting, and also just a great wealth of ideas, and they always thought about things that I never would have thought of. And so I think there's a kernel there of some of the concept behind open source that, again, if you cast a wide net, you're more likely to catch interesting new ideas. Now, I don't think that was necessarily the motivation behind Stallman's initial work in free software, but I think it's one of the more profound and important consequences of free software is that you're really going to be able to learn from everyone, not just learn from yourself or from some narrow collection of people. And then there's another thing. When we started One Laptop Per Child, I used to quip that I would draw a line in the sand and say that unequivocally, you can argue whether this should be free software or that should be free software, but unequivocally, there are two areas where software has to be free, and that is voting machines and education. Voting machines, because how else are you going to ever trust it? For those are the for that reason alone, when we did One Laptop Per Child, it was just super clear to me right from the very beginning, this has to be free and open software. And so that was one of the things that we took really seriously right from the very beginning of the project. And all the work I've been doing since in technology and learning has followed that same.
So I was interested in about how was this whole open source thing was when you were a student. Was there a concept of open source back then?
Not really, but I mean, there wasn't, when I was a student, first of all, when I was an undergrad at Harvard, there wasn't even a computer science department. It was called applied math. And there wasn't really a software industry per se. I mean, there was a computer hardware industry. And actually, in some ways, it's a model similar to what we have today, which is you didn't actually buy software, you bought services. So you would buy a service from IBM, and IBM would provide software as part of the service you were buying for them. And in some sense, you were leasing the service. You weren't buying the software or the computer. You were leasing a computer, a mainframe, in order to accomplish some task. And it wasn't until maybe, when I was at MIT is when sort of the software industry was just beginning. And then it was interesting. I remember a real frustration. I was using, I don't remember what tool it was. It was not FrameMaker because it was before FrameMaker. But I remember I was using a word process, not a word processor, but sort of a document processing tool, and they had a really nice algorithm in the tool for figuring out when to wrap text, how to wrap text in a window. And I said, I really would like to use that algorithm from that software in some work I'm doing over here. And it was impossible. And I remember that was sort of my first realization, personal realization, that, hey, there's something broken here in this model that there's something there's a sort of this powerful idea sitting over here that's unavailable over here, even though what I'm doing is not in any have any bearing in terms of being sort of a competitive product or anything. It's just I want to take that and use it here, and take this and use it there, and sort of construct upon the knowledge and the tool base I have. But because it was proprietary, it was sort of my first encounter with that. Before that, all the that was one of the first times I was using commercial software as opposed to software that was, built in-house. Everything else was all in-house. The operating system was built, in-house. The compiler was built in-house. Everything was built from the bottom up. So it was a little shocking, is maybe the right word. I was it made me stop and think a little bit about how things work. And to a large extent, for a long time after that, I avoided commercial software altogether, just out of frustration. Even though there were some really good software frameworks available, I just decided it wasn't worth going down that path for me personally. So, over the course of my career at MIT, certainly a lot of what we ended up doing was, again, building our own tools. And actually, some of those tools, not that I built, but that some of the tools that my students and some of my colleagues' students built are things that industry is using today, the world is using today. So, for example, style sheets, CSS was done by one of my students. P5 was done by students of John Maeda. So there are a lot of these tools that that are really important tools in the whole software ecosystem that came from that were built right from the ground up as open resources. And I also used to quip about the World Wide Web and what made HTML take off. Why that protocol? Because there were a lot of competing protocols at the time, and I think that there really were two things that made it happen. The first was that Tim Berners-Lee convinced his management at CERN to let him make it be an open standard. And then the other was, and I hate to give him credit for this, but the Mosaic browser
Yeah.
had a view source button, so it went a step further, and this is really important. Okay, it didn't just say, okay, this is free software, this is open, but here's a button I'm going to provide in the interface to make it easy for you to actually see the code.
Yeah.
It's not just that you have the right to see the code, just push a button and there it is. And I think that was brilliant. That was what made it so that anybody suddenly could look under the hood and see how this thing worked. And that was markedly different from all the other protocols that were out there at the time. The way in which it embraced letting people see. And actually, when we started Sugar Labs, we did that, but we actually took it a step further. Okay, so I designed all the keyboards for one laptop per child, and I put on the keyboard a key dedicated to view source. So there was a key at the keyboard, you click it and you see the source code of anything you're working on. And then when it displayed the source code, there was another button on the screen which was basically fork this. So you could fork anything you were working on and break it, change it, modify it. So we tried to make the interface, we sort of took that lesson from Mosaic and we tried to make it easy for our users to see and take advantage of free software. But I'll argue there's one more thing you need to do, and that is that a lot of software today, I've been writing code for most of my life. For 50 years I've been writing code. There's still a lot of code I look at and it's like, I don't get it. And it's a struggle for me to understand what this code is doing. And so what we did with Sugar very deliberately from the very beginning was we knew that the people who were going to be looking at this code were going to be new to programming. And so we put a lot of effort into trying to make it clear, trying to make it be approachable, trying to make it we built the idea of modifying the code by someone new to coding, part of the core idea behind how we did the coding. So, we weren't always successful and maybe even less successful today than we were in the early days because there's just so much more going on. But nonetheless, putting that effort in so that it's not just open, but you also have a license to do something with the code, and then we also make it be easy to take advantage of the fact that you have that license. You can we make it so you can actually exercise the license, not just have the license. And I think
Yeah.
that's still, to a large extent, something that's I would still say that's unique to the Sugar Labs approach to software, which is something I think is really it's important. Whether or not the world adopts it en masse doesn't matter. I think we're telling a story that's an important story to be told. That again, there's a difference between it being open, you can look at it, versus you actually have a license to do something, versus it's actually been designed so that you can actually do something with it. A lot of that, I think, is again, I think it takes work, it takes a little bit of extra time, it makes things a little bit clumsy and bulky sometimes. But, from the point of view of this is an education project, this is a learning project, it's fundamental. You can't cut that corner.
Yeah, so like even the time when I was contributing, I was new at the time, and even then it was like very approachable. Like hats off for you guys to putting in that effort initially. But the whole open source thing happened after the formal introduction of Git and GitHub, maybe, and maybe it was popularized around that.
No, no,
After
no.
that,
I mean, Git is long after the beginning of open source. Open source has been around for 2 decades before Git. Yeah. So Git happens to be a really powerful idea.
yeah,
One of the things in one of the pedagogy behind Sugar Labs is something called constructionism. Okay, and constructionism is Seymour Pappert's take on constructivism. Constructivism was sort of from his mentor, but the idea behind it, and I sum it up. I don't really do it justice, but I sum it up by saying you learn through doing. So if you want more learning, you want more doing. And computation is a great way to do things. But Seymour also had this concept of powerful ideas, and so there are these powerful ideas, and you want kids to be exposed to them so they can build from them, experience them, do things with them. Construct from them, from the powerful ideas. And to my knowledge, calculus, for example, has only ever been invented twice, once by Newton, once by Leibniz. I don't expect every child to invent calculus. Calculus is a powerful idea, and we want to expose them to calculus and give them, again, some hooks into calculus, put them in calculus land. Seymour used to talk about math land. But I think that Git is a powerful idea, and I think that exposing kids and teachers to that idea is going to help them grow and help them do things they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So again, I don't expect them to invent Git, although, sort of source code management's been invented a number of different times. Git happens to be a really good instance of that, and it's also an open instance of that. So for those two reasons, I thought it would be a good basis of, developing this project. But I really think the core ideas behind Git are just important fundamental ideas that people should be exposed to and be able to build from. And I think we, only sort of play lip service to it in the current implementation. So that's why I was super excited about your project this summer.
yeah, that was what excited me also. Like here in India, a lot of students are like exposed to actual open source through, GSoC. So GSoC is like a thing over here, and you are mentoring since a long time. It's, I guess, almost a decade or more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what actually do you look for in students who can be like good project makers?
Yeah, I guess different organizations look for different things out of the GSoC, and I actually sort of harken back to when I was looking at admitting students into the program at MIT. And there were different faculty who had different approaches to this. I remember a colleague of mine, Bill Schreibner. Bill was a brilliant, brilliant engineer. He was working on, he was running the Advanced Television Research Program at MIT. And he had it all mapped out in his head exactly what he wanted to accomplish. So he was recruiting students to fill in this. I took a very different approach. I'm not as smart as Bill, so I didn't have everything completely laid out and planned out in my head. So I was interested in students who were going to come in and help me learn something new. So I think in GSoC I do the same thing. I want to find students who demonstrate some capacity, but at the same time they're going to teach Sugar Labs something new. They're going to bring Sugar Labs to some new place. We have some general ideas of the problems we want to tackle, but the students are the ones that are going to really help us figure that out and bring fresh ideas to the table. I'll sum up again here. So there are two different, or at least two different approaches to student selection. One approach is if you have everything mapped out in your head exactly what you want done, and you choose students that are demonstrated the capacity to do those things. So, I knew I wanted to explore Git in music blocks this summer. So I could have just chosen a student who was just going to follow my lead and step by step do exactly what I told them. And that's fine, but it's not optimal in my mind. Okay. I'm looking for something a little bit different for two reasons. One is I don't have all the ideas, and so I'm looking for a student who's going to contribute ideas as well. And the other is that I want to have something that is going to grow. So I want to bring in students who show the capacity for growth. And if all they're doing is doing what I tell them to do, that's not going to really demonstrate that capacity. So I used to talk about that. It could be that there's a brilliant student, but they aren't engaged with what we're doing. It's like two ships passing in the night. Or it might be a student who just, does everything I tell them, but I don't learn anything. Or it's a student who comes in, gets involved, and takes me to a new place, or takes Sugar Labs to a new place. That's the ideal student. So that's what we look for at Sugar Labs. We're not just plugging in, filling in holes, but we're looking for students who are going to teach us something. So
I want to come to the hot topic these days, AI, and I know you're not a big fan of that AI is going to replace all of the existing setup, but I still want to know about what do you think would be the future of is it going to be focused on LLMs or are there multiple aspects?
So let me answer that in a few different ways. So first of all, AI is a lot more than LLMs. I think the popular notion of what AI these days is LLMs. Chat is, but that's only one corner of what AI is. Also, AI has been around for quite a while. So the first AI conference was held at Dartmouth College in 1956. So it's been a while. And the other thing about AI, and I can recommend a couple of books. Okay, one of them is a book that Marvin Minsky wrote in 1985 called Society of Mind. And Society of Mind basically defined the concept of agents. So this whole, agentic agent thing, I call it Society of Mind. Okay, it's an idea that's 40 years old, and it's a powerful idea. And I think that I think thinking about an agent that is using the LLM, that's one agent, but there are other agents out there too. And the other book I recommend is another book by Minsky called The Emotion Machine. And The Emotion Machine is really a book about, we have these agents, how are they organized? Here's a here's one way in which agents might actually be organized to provide some level of intelligence. And so I think between those two books, I think they cover a lot of how I think this whole thing's going to evolve. I don't think that people will necessarily think about it in those terms, but I think that pragmatically that's actually what is happening and will happen. I don't think LLMs in and of themselves are going to become super intelligent. I think LLMs are just one arrow in the quiver. They happen to be a powerful tool, but they're not the whole answer by any means. And I think they need to be. I think that the real solutions need to organize around what Minsky in the Emotion Machine called a cognitive tower, where there's sort of layers of intelligence and lots of communication between the layers to solve problems. I think that model is a powerful model, and I've not seen another one that makes more sense to me. I mean, it might not be the right model, but it's certainly worth knowing about. So I'm not sure if I answered your question or not, but
Got it. I remember you like discussing about Eliza when we do these introductory classes in AI. We learn about like all the history and stuff. And to imagine that you have worked like with closely with such systems is like very inspiring.
so there's actually before there was Eliza. So I think I've mentioned this in on occasion. There's a really great video that was aired by CBS in 1961 that was narrated by Jerome Wiesner about AI projects at MIT, and it's incredible. It's just incredible what they were doing in 1961. I did have the opportunity to work with a lot of those people that are in the video, sort of later in their careers, but I really recommend, Google that video. It's fantastic. Just a lot of, again, some of the implementations were a little crude, but the wealth of ideas that are expressed in that video, it's remarkable.
I was wondering if you have like an opinion on will the student learning or all the learning process in general would change because of AI? Will there be we at Sugar Labs also like develop AI projects to help students learn better, but fundamentally, is there going to be a change as we see the scale at which AI is impacting?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. But again, I think there's going to be a lot of misuse of AI in education, and there'll be a few kernels of really powerful ideas as well. I mean, I think about computers in education, and there were sort of two paths, and most of the world went you know one direction, and we went the other direction at Sugar Labs. When I was a kid, we didn't have computers in school. We had mimeograph machines. Mimeograph machines were the precursor to Xerox machines. They were stenciled with purple ink, and the ink had this delicious smell to it. So everybody wanted to be the kid that got chosen to operate the mimeograph machine because you got to smell that ink. But we called it the purple plague because what a lazy teacher would do is just use the mimeograph machine to crank out worksheets. So learning was worksheets. And I will argue even today that, 90% of what people do with computers and learning is worksheets. The computer's great at making worksheets, but there's not a lot of learning that happens in worksheets. And Papert and Solomon, their insight was that the computer is a thing to think with, and it's something that you can deploy for making and doing and not just answering questions. And I think that there's another fork in the road vis-a-vis AI, and I really like the approach that Sugar Labs is taking around AI, where we're not using generative AI to make things for the kids. We're using generative AI to help the kids reflect on what they've made. To some degree, we can also use the AI to help them with the making, to accelerate the making, but the real focus is on having the AI be a mentor, having the AI provide critique, having the AI help them with debugging, provide some scaffolding to let them reach higher. So it's not about having the AI generate the text for them, it's having the AI really engage them in a discussion about why did you say that? What were you trying to do here? It's much more about reflection than about generation. And I think that's going to have huge impact on learning because it's going to mean that there can be more reflection and higher quality reflection and just a lot of fun at the same time.
Yeah, so currently I feel whenever I talk to like any of these LLMs, they generally agree to what I say, but I want them to be more critical of what I say. Even if I'm posing them a vague idea, they are just like, okay, that sounds good. I think we are having some time to go to that, reflective part, but I agree. This is like the way forward.
Yeah, I mean it's even worse than that because they basically are going to keep you within the model. They're going to keep you within the world that they've been trained on. So there's not really a lot of room for innovation, new ideas, and there is a lot of room for trouble. And so in my day job at Cicero, I'm doing a lot of work with having the AI sort of engage in some of these kinds of activities as well. And there are all sorts of places where it becomes quite dangerous what the AI is doing. Another quip of mine is the AI, generative AI, is always certain, sometimes right. And the problem with that is that if you don't engage in critique of the AI, then you're going to be taking things at face value that aren't true, and you're going to be heading off and you're going to get into trouble. So one of the things we need to do is make sure that the kids are engaged in a critical dialogue, not just the AI critiquing them, but them critiquing the AI. I don't think we've really gotten quite that far yet in our work at Sugar Labs, but it's really important not to trust these things completely. They just aren't trustworthy. So again, it's fine in certain contexts, in the context of the life sciences, for example, and in the context of learning, I think it can be quite dangerous.
And this is like sort of a personal question. If you were like 20 today and you are of my age, and what things would you be focusing on? And if you reflect back on your journey and what things you have learned, given the current scenario.
Well, I mean, I think one thing is you want to do things. You don't want to just read about things, you want to do things. So I think as many different opportunities for actually experiencing and doing, I think is really important because that's going to really be the grounding for whatever you do in the future. And you also probably want to do a few things really deeply and really thoroughly. And again, even though it's not necessarily what your life career is going to be, it doesn't matter. The experience of doing something thoroughly, doing something deeply, whatever the thing is, doesn't matter. That experience of depth is really important. So that's going to serve you well, knowing how to take something and really follow it through in great depth. And I think that one of the things, the other thing that I wish I had learned earlier on in my career was just really understanding how to do an experiment, how to conduct an experiment that actually that's significant and repeatable. I think that the way we teach science, at least in my experience, it sort of goes through the motions of that, but I don't think we really ever, I don't think I really understood the scientific method when I was in school. I knew what it was in the abstract, but I think the way that we did experiments in school wasn't really, it didn't really push me very hard. I think really understanding what science actually is super important. And even if
Yes,
you're not going to be a scientist, understanding what science is really important. And I don't think that we really teach that very well.
correct. It's like
You know,
it gives a very logical.
it probably gets taught better in philosophy class than it does in biology lab.
So what since you hire students also from MIT, you yourself are from MIT, you have worked with all these students with very great pedigree, and you have also worked with students like us. So is there something fundamentally different, or these colleges shape in the mind of students you find? Because I'm asking this because I've seen like a lot of cutting edge technology emerging through these colleges.
Right. MIT is a little bit of a bubble. It's a little different. You mentioned in the introduction I went to Harvard and MIT. And let me tell you the difference between Harvard and MIT, and I think it's also the difference between MIT and, for example, the IITs in India.
Yeah.
MIT trusts its students. MIT trusts its students. That's the difference. It's not because MIT students are smarter than students from here or there. In fact, a lot of MIT students are from India. So it's not a matter of India versus the United States. It's a matter of MIT trusts its students. And I think that trust is really why the students go so far and do so much. And I can give you lots of different examples. My favorite example is actually quite simple. Harvard has a very extensive art collection. Got beautiful museums and beautiful art. And when you come to university in the fall, they have an exhibit, and you can buy a poster from the art exhibit from their collection, poster of this or that. And it's nice posters, and a lot of students have posters in their dorm room. MIT has a modest art collection, not insignificant, but modest compared to Harvard. And what MIT does at the beginning of the year, they have an exhibit. They invite the students in, and they give each student a little index card, and you write down your 3 favorite things. And then they have a lottery, and they disperse the art collection to the students' dorms for the year. So my daughter had a Miro in her dorm room for the first 3 years, and then one of my graduate students got that her senior year. She was so mad. But MIT trusts their students, so they don't think, well, the art belongs in a vault in a closet somewhere. No, the art belongs in the students' rooms where it actually can be used and appreciated. So that's the difference between Harvard and MIT, and I think that's the difference between MIT and most universities. MIT trusts its students. That's it.
Got it, got it. Just one last question. What is keeping you going on for so long? You are 70 and you work like 14 hours a day. I cannot imagine myself to be working this hard at this age. What is it exactly?
That old? Come on. No, I have a secret, okay? My secret is I've got a really poor memory. And because I've got a really poor memory, the world is always new to me. And so I'm curious about this new world. So that's my secret.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks for joining, Walter. It was wonderful as always talking to you.
All right. Thank you.
Hope to see you
Talk to you
often.
soon.